everybody, and welcome again to another webinar from Oculus Insights, all part of our COVID-19 Resilience Guide. My name is Mike Pownall. I'm part of Oculus Insights. Just going to wait a couple of minutes as more and more people are joining on board here. We're also streaming live on Facebook today, so that might be somewhere where you may want to go and check us out too. But I would ask everybody, as you're signing in, if you could maybe just put in the chat button, if you can just put what country you're from. We like to always know where people are coming from. And also, if you have any requests for any subjects that we may want to do in the next webinar or two. So it is just after 3 o'clock Eastern Central Time. So let's start talking about key performance indicators for the successful veterinary practice. And I think, you know, some of the people, when I was preparing this, people had asked, is this all time? Is this just COVID time? What is it? And this is, you know, all time. But as you see, as we get into it, there are always the, you know, what we always say in a good answer always in business is it depends. And so I'll give you some examples of how maybe what would be a normal key performance indicator may have changed during this COVID time. So why key performance indicators? Peter Drucker was probably the foremost business thought leader of the 20th century. The guy was absolutely brilliant. And he's the kind of person that I can go back and read his books and you know, just read chapters or articles he's written. And just, you know, he'll write stuff in the 50s and, you know, if you just change the gender pronouns a little bit, he's so spot on in terms of what happened with business. And one of his great lines is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And I think that is the key aspect of what we're trying to do. And this will sort of be our guide as we're going along is, you know, if there's an area that you're concerned about, or if there's an area that you are wondering, are we doing this well? Are we doing it as well as we can? That's somewhere where we can measure it. And so I think, you know, we can look at things in our practices and go, I think, you know, as veterinarians, the biggest trouble we can often get into is we assume without doing the right diagnostics that there's a condition. And so instead of saying, you know, hey, you don't really run some tests or let's take an x-ray or what have you, we'll just go, I think this is what it is, and we'll start prescribing it. And I don't know about you, but you know, that's when it's blown up in my face, when I assumed without doing the measurements or done the diagnostics. And that's how I kind of look at, you know, our key performance indicators. The key thing about key performance indicators is often I have people come to me and just say, Mike, you know, what are the 5 key performance indicators I need for my practice, or what are the 10, whatever the number is. And, you know, every practice is different. And so going back to, if you want to improve it, you need to measure it. It all comes down to your own practice. As we go through some sections today, I will bring up some that I think, you know, it'd be a good idea for everybody to do. But really what you want them to do is they're personal to you. You should be able to look at the number, understand what it means, understand if it's a good number, if it's a number that is improving, because again, you want to look at these numbers to be able to improve your practice. Is it something that is actionable, that you can look at it and go, this means something, if I do an action in response to it, I will get some improvement. It's not something that you want to look at a key performance indicator and go, well, that's neat, that's interesting, and do nothing about it. The good key performance indicators are ones you look at, measure against yourself, measure against your goals, and, you know, and act upon it. And I look at the KPIs, as I said before, it's like, you know, when you get blood work for a patient, you can monitor, you know, based on the, you know, a CBC or you know, or total protein, whatever, if your patient's doing better, if it's improving, if it's, you know, if it's getting worse, if the treatments that you're doing are responding. And the KPIs are the exact same thing. They are not the solution. There's too many people will look at a KPI and go, as soon as I know my KPI, I'm good. But no, KPI is just the results of whatever actions. It's sort of the scorecard at the end of the day that, you know, what you're doing and how well you're managing it, it's working. And so, you know, these are the things that I say, it's really the results of actions, that's your output from all the work that you're putting into managing. And then one of the things you're going to notice with KPIs is that they're all connected. So you may be, I'll give you an example a bit of, you may be looking at a marketing metric, something to measure how well your marketing is doing, but it's really connected to your staffing. It could be really connected to some internal processes. So it's hard to look at any of these in isolation from each other and know that, if you're going to do an action on A, it typically will have some kind of effect on B. So when we're looking at KPIs, never look at them alone or isolated from each other. Realize that each of them have a role. Often they'll support each other. And, for example, we'll look at revenue later on, or we'll, that's totally tied into your marketing and how successful your marketing is. If you're bringing in new clients or you're getting people to try new services, that's going to increase your revenue. So you really have to look at this and how it's all balanced. And that balance is a phrase we'll come back to in a couple of slides. The other thing we should be looking at is what should we measure? And again, when we say what should we measure, that really comes down to what's important for you. And as I say, people say, give me, what are the 5 top ones, or what kind of dashboard? No, you could have 4 KPIs. You could have 3 KPIs. You may have a couple that you're going to measure every month. Some you're going to measure every week. Others are going to measure once a year. So our KPIs are going to vary throughout the year. It's going to vary in terms of time of the year. It's going to vary when we figure like how, KPIs changed with the COVID. I'll give you some examples in a couple slides of how something that I would look at once a month, I started looking at daily, trying to track what was going on with COVID. If anybody has any questions as I'm going along, we can wait till the end, but I like catching questions as they happen. So there's a button that says Q&A. If there's a question there, please don't hesitate just to type a question. I'm flying solo today, so I may not see it right away, but I've just opened the Q&A screen on my laptop here, so hopefully I can look at it as we're going along. So when we look at what we should measure, some of them are standards. Every practice will measure it, and we'll measure it the same way. Well, most of them though are very unique to your practice. And so what else, as we're going along, I'll give you an example of some that I think are standards every practice should do, and some that we'll sort of talk about that I'll do in my own practice that are unique to me, because these are things I want to look at. And really what I'm hoping that you get out of this presentation, more than ideas of some key performances, is to be able to look at your practice and go, what am I wanting to measure? What am I wanting to see if I'm doing well, or if I have areas of improvement? So a lot of KPIs are balanced on a theory called the Balanced Scorecard. The Balanced Scorecard was an article written in the Harvard Business Review in the early, I think it was 1992. I have the reference coming up. And basically they said the Balanced Scorecard is just really a link between short-term results and what our long-term goals are. So there are short-term results. We want to look at what our monthly revenue is, or turnover, or we want to look at our profitability. But there are things that we want to make sure that we have long-term goals. Maybe I want to introduce a new vet. Maybe I want to introduce new services. Maybe I want to market something. Maybe we're positioning in ourselves and our strategy to have a bigger impact. And maybe it's a 3-year plan, but with our Balanced Scorecard or various metrics, we can track our plan to see if it's working, see if we can adjust things. So I look at my KPIs and how it's part of the Balanced Scorecard as something that I look at things that are happening now, things that I can have an impact on now, or information I'm going to receive now that's going to influence me 6 months, 8 months, 6 years down the road. Again, I'll give you some examples of that when they come up. Excuse me. Yeah, so here's the result. So it's 1992. If you just Google the Balanced Scorecard 1992, this article will come up. It's a lengthy article, but it really goes into great detail, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. So the Balanced Scorecard says, let's look at some common things in our practice. Let's just not just look at finances. Let's look at other factors like how do customers perceive us? What are some of the processes, our internal processes that we do that we want to measure? In the original Balanced Scorecard, they talked about innovation and learning. What does your company do to innovate? What does your company do to, to train your staff, train your vets, or what have you? I just shortened that for my own use to staff. You could add a fifth one to this. I mean, it really, you can modify this for your own business of what's important to you. And so for our discussion today, I'm going to focus on these four. So I'm just having a quick little peek to see if there's anything in the Q&A, to see if there's any questions there. I don't see anything yet. So I will carry on. So customers. So there are a lot of metrics that we can look at customers, and our business does a lot of marketing. I recommend anybody in the business do a lot of marketing. During this whole COVID pandemic, we actually ramped up our marketing, really taking advantage that a lot of the online ad rates are cheaper. Also that most people, when they're looking at cost cutting, they cut all of their marketing, when as evidence has shown that actually the more you market during a downturn, you're going to come out of the downturn in a lot better place. So these are, I would say, I have 6 KPIs that we can look at, but there are about 4 that I look at religiously, and that's the Net Promoter Score, new customer acquisition cost, the lifetime value of a client, and new client source. We'll talk a little bit about new services or reminders, but that's an example that I'll use in my own practice. We've introduced some new services in the past year. We've opened up a new location. So I'm really looking at that one specific area separate from everything else to see how we're doing it. Another factor you can look at is reminders. We send out reminders every year for routine vaccines or dentistry or what have you. What is the compliance with your reminders? That's a really good factor. So let's dig in a little bit more. So the Net Promoter Score basically comes from research that was done trying to look at customer loyalty. And too often we have surveys that have a lot of questions and they're not really quantifiable. They're more like, is the parking lot clean? Do people treat you nicely? And basically the Net Promoter Score really says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you going to recommend me to your friends and family? The belief being that, that's the ultimate sense of how we view a business, is that we put our own reputations on the line and recommend it to somebody else. And so the Net Promoter Score, we send out a survey. Somebody says on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend them? Somebody will say a 9 or a 10. They're promoters. They love you. They are big fans of your business. Then there are those 6, 7, and 8. They're neutral. Yeah, they like you. I don't know. They're not necessarily looking for an alternative, but if one came up, they may consider it. And then there are the below 6, 1 to 5. They're detractors. They're probably looking for another reason to use another vet, another business. And so basically, the Net Promoter Score is you get the amount of promoters and the amount of detractors to get your answer. So really, what you're trying to do is either get a lot of promoters, minimal detractors, or maybe even a bigger neutral zone. So for example, if you had 70% promoters and 30% detractors, you'd have a 40% Net Promoter Score. So this is one that I would say you could look at this daily. Some softwares are integrated when you have a client shows up there, automatically when they invoice out from the day, a survey is going to be sent to them and asking this question. And often on a good survey, there'll be a spot for comments. So maybe they can add a little bit of why they chose the score they did, or whether it's high or low. Some softwares are not so interactive. Some of them are kind of walled off. They don't have an API, what they call an API, that allows one software to talk to the other. So you have to do it manually, and sometimes you're going to pull it out weekly or monthly. The key thing with the Net Promoter Score is that you don't want to send it off too often to the same person. If you've got somebody that has a lot of pets that you're seeing frequently, they're coming in once a week, once a month for a treatment or check-ins, maybe sending it every time is a bit overkill. So we sort of cut it to once every 3 months. If we haven't seen a client in 3 months, they show up again, we send out the Net Promoter Score. This, to me, is one of the ones I look at religiously. I look at it every month. We don't have a great software integration, so we send it out once a month. This gives me a lot of insight, and it gives my team a lot of insight of what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and it really helps us when we have an area like we have been in a bit of a bit of a recession, the economy is slowing down, you're thinking, well, how, people are going to stick around with me? And yes, we get high net promoter scores. So this is one that I would say that, yeah, this could be one of your primary ones. Absolutely, every practice should be doing something like this. Other one is our customer acquisition costs. We spend a lot of money on marketing, and the whole thing in marketing is, get it paid for. If I do action A, if I put an ad in a magazine or I do some Facebook ads, will they give me new customers? And it's sometimes hard to draw a straight line or a couple of lines that connects from I started my action and I ended up with a customer. So what we say is, let's figure out what the total cost that we spent advertising, promoting it. So whether it's the labor, the person that takes care of all your marketing, the person that does your Facebook posts, updates your website, your cost for advertising, if you sent out any creative, you want to get an ad creative, you just get everything that you would spend on advertising, any clothing that you have, any website expenses, any swag, if you got like coffee mugs or anything that you give away to customers. That is your total cost. And then you get your practice management software to say, okay, over a year or over 6 months, how many new customers did I get? So in this example, let's say you spent $40,000 in this year and you got 500 new customers, ended up being an $80 customer acquisition cost. When we go to the next metric, you'll determine if that's a high price or not. So really, this is something that we don't have any industry standards. You can't talk to another practice and go, hey, by the way, what's your customer acquisition cost? We don't really know it. But you can look at yourself and go, you know what, it's $80 now. What if I can get the same for 75? The cheaper we can get a good customer, the right kind of customer, the better. You also may want to do this to a new service. Like let's say you're promoting, let's not call it a customer acquisition cost, but let's say you're introducing a new specialty, and maybe you're adding acupuncture into your practice. Well, then maybe you could sit there and go, well, I spent $20,000 training my veterinarian, advertising it, and the customer acquisitions that we got over a year was a B, and that's telling me that it was a worthwhile investment. So this is where you can get really specific and you can craft these KPIs specific to your business. So the next time we look at $80 to get a customer, and then we look at what's the lifetime value of a client. Another great metric we use in marketing. And basically what you're looking at is what does the average client spend per year? So your practice software can say, hey, we had 5,000 appointments and the average transaction is that, or you can look at it, can we look at it by client? So again, your practice management software will help you and give you the amount of clients that you have and what your spend is. And then what you sort of figure out is what is the average numbers of years that are clients with my practice? So again, some of the softwares can give you a retention, that maybe you lose 10% of your clients every year. And so it can tell you that your average client stays with you for 6 years, 8 years. Again, you've got to dig down a little bit, but what great information. So in this example, I'll do this one annually. So in this one, let's say the average client spends $500 and they're with me for 7 years. So the lifetime value of that client is $3,500. So if you spent $80 for $3,500 of income, that's not bad. That's a cheap investment for a long-term return on a client. And we always know the clients that we have are the least expensive clients. If we're always turning over clients and we got to get, spend to get new ones, there's some expense. So this is where it's a balance between acquiring new customers, spending some money, and really making sure that your clients stay with you over many years. And hopefully they start spending more money, that they're not going to the pet store to buy their dog food or cat food, and they're spending more with you. So that makes your lifetime value even higher. The other thing we look at is every new client. Let's ask, where are they coming from? How do they hear about us? So if we're advertising, and again, we're going back into the marketing acquisition costs, and we're spending a lot of money on YouTube, and you track it every month, and this is how we do this one monthly, and nobody's coming in through YouTube. You may want to look at it and go, either we're not doing a good job on YouTube, or You know, if we're going to invest in YouTube, maybe we don't invest in YouTube really, is because we're not getting anything there. You know, we seem like Facebook or Instagram, boy, we're getting all of our clients off of them, or we're getting it off of Google AdWords. You can make whatever the metrics you are, and then you can go back, look at it and go, all right, I'm spending $80 a year on per client. You know, we spent $5,000 on YouTube, putting together YouTube videos, and we got 3 new clients. Yeah, maybe it's not worth it. Let's get that $5,000, maybe invest more of it in Facebook or Instagram. And then again, I like, you know, if you're a growing practice, you're introducing new services, maybe new modalities, something to track. You know, you've invested in often training. Maybe it's a new piece of equipment. Maybe you've invested laser or dentistry or any kind of machine. Well, let's start tracking it. Let's see if you're making money on it. And so those are things I'll look at: sales, I'll look at it monthly, I'll compare it to what we expected. Again, you know, too often people will get a new service and then they'll just sort of forget about it. And at the end of the year, they'll look and go, yeah, we did okay in lasering. Well, I want to know sooner rather than later, because maybe, you know, if it hasn't met my expectations, then maybe we got to do something more marketing. Maybe there's more staff training that needs to happen. So again, these are very specific to individual practices. And then another one is our reminders, you know, and I want to check on those seasonally. And I'd like to check on those, you know, based on how I'm sending out reminders. Are we getting more compliance with email versus phone calling versus a postcard versus texting? Those are the things you want to track, because if we're going to be, you know, going back to measure what we can improve, we've got to look at all these factors and say, you know what, we spend a lot of time phoning people and we get really poor compliance. Versus when we go to email or texting, we get a lot better because people are right there, boom, that, you know, if there's a way you can integrate your schedule or people can contact you right from their phone, maybe texting's the best way. So again, before we go on to the next section, I'm just going to see if there's anybody has any questions in the Q&A. Otherwise, I'm going to keep on going. Staff. So we want to look at the people inside of our practice, and there's a lot of things that we can look at, you know, overtime, absenteeism. I'm not going to spend much time on them. That's very easy to track. You just get your payroll summaries when you submit your payrolls, and you can just count it. It's an easy one to look at. You know, compare the year before, the month before, the quarter before, whatever time frame you want. Overtime and absenteeism are pretty standard ones, and they're good ones to look at, particularly if we're, you know, we're going through a downturn. You know, it tells me, hey, wow, we're, you know, no wonder everybody's so tired. Everybody's doing overtime. Or, boy, we're spending so much money on overtime. Maybe we need to hire somebody. Maybe we're understaffed. So, but what I really want to talk about is employee engagement and a little bit of employee turnover. So, and if you've been following our podcasts and our webinars and our blogs, you know, at Oculus, we believe that a foundation of any great business is the people. That's what makes your business special. And having a team of highly engaged employees really can make a difference, especially in this pandemic time of, you know, having great growth, improved profitability, more loyal clients, and professional satisfaction amongst your staff. I mean, vets are hard to get, and good support staff's hard to get. So if we can have a great environment that people are like, you know what, I want to work at that business, you're going to get the cream of the crop, the best vets that are out there. So we want to measure that. So basically, emotional employee engagement is the emotional commitment that an employee has to the organization and its goals. And what we do is an annual survey. We use the same survey every year. If you have questions about it, you can talk to us, because we've done it for many practices across the globe, and that's giving us a good idea of how, you know, how highly engaged employees are in vet practices. But for us, this is a big thing. We look at it annually, because what we want to do is, if we can have great staff that want to work for us, we know we're going to be more profitable. We know we're going to have greater revenue. We know we're going to have more loyal clients. This is something that we really focus on a lot, and we pay a lot of attention to it. The other thing to look at is employee turnover. And so maybe you're a business and you're like, boy, we can't seem to keep people, or we're always trying to hire new people. Well, let's look at our employee turnover. And that's basically the number of employees that left during the year over your average number of employees. And when I'm talking about that, I'm not talking about the people that came and worked for a summer student, or somebody that left for maternity leave, or somebody left because their spouse got a job in another part of the country and they had to move. I'm talking about people that are like, I'm fed up with this place, I don't want to work here anymore, or I'm just moving on to something else, or you've had to fire them. And so, you know, what we want with this is to sort of say like, how are we doing? Are we just a treadmill of people that's coming on and off to our business, or do we have some stability? Again, another one of these things that we don't have industry standards, so you want to compare to your own practice. So here's an example. So you have 3 employees left in the year, you have 9 on average, that's a 33% employee turnover. So that's something that you want to look at, because, you know, when we're talking about, remember I said everything is connected, employee turnover really affects your bottom line. It really affects your profitability. Good research has said that 50 to 75% of the salary, you need to pay 50 to 75% of the salary of a junior or support staff to train, bring a new person on board. You know, looking for a job, the inefficiencies. We all know the factors of what it takes to get a new person on. It's really an inefficient, cumbersome way to get people on board. If you're losing veterinarians or very experienced staff, you know, it could be up to 150% of what their annual salary is. So you can see, if you have a high turnover rate, how this can affect your bottom line. Let's say, for example, that we had somebody that was at $32,000 a year salary. Doesn't matter which country you're from. It could be a euro. Doesn't matter. And so if that's a junior person, you're spending $16,000 to $24,000 per person per year. And if you lost 3 people, like we just said in that other example, that's up to $48,000 to $72,000. So this is a great example of our connectivity and our metrics of, I want to look at my profitability. Ooh, how can I get myself more profitable? Maybe if I had better employees, or I hired better, or I had better training, or I really worked on my employee engagement, I'd have less turnover, more profit. Another area we're going to look at is processes. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think these are some of the things that we want to look at. Appointment capacity, you know, how many filled appointment spots do you have on a weekly, monthly, annual basis? When people say, hey, we don't have enough room, and then you look at it and go, wow, 20% of our time slots are empty, we have capacity. How long are people having to wait? By the time they show up for their appointment, this is something that your receptionist can do. Hey, they came in, they checked in for a 3 o'clock appointment. Once the ticker starts at 3 o'clock, the doctor doesn't see him, or the technician didn't bring him in until 10 after 3, we can start checking it and going, you know what, our wait time is, you know, it's about 10 minutes. Maybe we can get that down to 5. That's going to make our clients happier. What are we doing in the back that is causing these appointments for people to wait so long? You know, we want to look at our vet support staff, how we're training them, how we're bringing them on board. So those, again, this is a great example that every practice will have this uniquely for themselves in terms of their processes. You know, one of the things we instituted lately is we did some raise our fees at the beginning of the year. And so we had one person that said, well, I get so many complaints when we raise our fees, I'm really hesitant. So it's like, okay, you know what? This is a really simple KPI. Anytime a client complains about our prices, I want you to write it down in the book. And 6 months later, when there's only 2 people out of all the clients that we see at 3 practices, that's not very much. And so that's an area where I'm going, I don't really have to really worry about improving upon it. Nobody's really complaining about it. Let's just move on. So the last section is financial, and there's several of them, and they all sort of feed in together. And, you know, these are ones of the 6 that I have here. I think these are your standards. And the one on the bottom is your average days accounts receivable. You may not worry about this if all your clients pay a time of service. I have an equine practice. I knew some mixed animal practices, some food animal practices. We send invoices to our clients, so we have to wait. We don't have that luxury that our companion animal practice owners have of people coming and paying at the time of service. So let's go through these quickly. Revenue, you know, I'm looking at it monthly, quarterly, annually. When this COVID started, I guarantee you, as of March 16th, I was counting it every single day. I was comparing it to the same day or the same period of the year before, because I wanted to start tracking what's happening. Now that where I'm from, just outside Toronto, Canada, the veterinarians, we're not restricted. We were restricted to practice till about 4 weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago. Since then, you know, our sales are more robust. I'm only tracking this weekly now. But, you know, here's an example of this is something that COVID changed, that I went from something that I do monthly, looking at things quarterly, because sometimes you'll get a spike in a month. You're like, wow, that's crazy. Our business went up so much. Or you had a big dip. In 1 month doesn't make a trend. Now, a quarter can give you a bit more, sort of balances out the ups and downs of things. So months are suggestives, quarterlies give me a trend, and the annual thing really gives me a full analysis. You may also want to do a trailing 12 months, that you're always looking at the previous 12 months to help normalize things too. So there's a variety of ways that you can look at these KPIs. I like comparing it to the previous time period. If I'm looking at June or May 2020, I'm going to look at it at May 2019. I'm going to look at April, May, June, the second quarter of 2020. I'm going to compare it to 2019. With COVID, it's going to be ugly. It's going to be hard to compare it. It's not going to give me a lot of information, but it's going to tell me how deep a hole I'm in and how big a hole I got to climb out. Love comparing to my budget. I'm a big believer in having a budget for my practice. And this is an area where I really look at it. And you can break it down by profit centers. This could be unique. You know, again, how are we doing with dentistry? How are we doing with behavior appointments? How are we doing with dermatology? Is there an area where you want to be recognized? How are your sales? So you can really slice and dice this really well. The other one is EBITDA, and I think this is probably, to me, one of the more important metrics I'll look at. You can increase revenue and lose money. Sometimes it takes a lot of money, you know, marketing or investment to raise revenue to grow your business. But when I'm looking at EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, which is, you know, accounting terms, this really tells me how my profitability is. We all have different rates of taxes. We'll all have different rates of depreciation of equipment we've purchased, but the EBITDA is key. And this is something I'm going to look at monthly, quarterly, annually. Again, I want to compare to the previous time period. I want to compare to my budget. I want X percent profit at the beginning of the year. I'm tracking this. And it's also key because this is the number they're going to use if you're going to sell your practice or if you want to buy a practice, because when they're buying or selling, they're looking at EBITDA, because it gives you an idea of the profitability of your practice, and that's what somebody is buying. So EBITDA is a good one. I think this is one every practice should be doing. This is a standard one. The other one to think about is cash flow. What's left to pay after you get leases, loans, and what have you? I've had a number of vets say to me, boy, we had great sales. We had a record sales in May. I've got nothing in the bank though. And I'm saying, well, you know, what are your accounts receivables like? Which we'll get to. And they're like, oh, they're pretty good. But you know, what happens is, you know, in this example, let's say you had $100,000 in revenue for a month, a week, whatever. Your cost of goods, which we'll get to in another couple slides, which is your medication and your supplies, what you need to be able to deliver veterinary care, your payroll, your fixed expenses, which is your rent, your electricity, your insurance, just anything you need to do to open the door to start your business. So that gives you an EBITDA of about $5,000, which is good. You made a profit, great. But if you have equipment loans that total $6,000, you lost $1,000. So here's again another example is, you know, where I'm at in the Northeast of North America, winter's tough. We slow down in the winter. We really want to be busy in the spring and summer to make enough money to carry us over those slow months. And so when COVID hit, I actually did a cash flow projection ahead of a year. I wanted to know if I'm digging a hole, like March and April were just ugly for us, just ugly. All right, but what do I need to do to make sure I have enough cash to carry us over next winter? You know, have I replenished what we've lost? And by doing that, it gave me a really good indication that, hey, if our sales are down this percentage or our profitability is down, I'm in trouble. But I looked at it and I planned it. And I'm like, you know what, we're going to be okay. And so far, you know, and then I'm looking at it every month and I'm correcting it and just adjusting it. Of here's what I forecasted. Here's the reality, and you keep on changing it. So in a time like today, your cash flow budget is huge. What if we get a second wave? What if people are so cautious they don't want to go out very much? What if, you know, after the pent-up demand is gone, after a month or so, sales go down? So you play around with it and just say, what happens if my sales are down 10%, 20%? What happens if my payroll stays the same and my sales are down 20%? What does that look like? What if my sales are down 20% and I reduce my payroll by 10%. So you can really play around and play with various scenarios. So again, another one is average days accounts receivable. That's on average, if you're giving credit to people, how long it takes to collect. And that just averages out. And so, you know, accounts receivables, that's the, you know, your total accounts receivables divided by sales will give you your average days accounts receivable. Ideally, you want it less than 30 days. You want to collect your money before you have to pay your bills. If you're buying inventory, you got to pay it in 30 days. I want to get paid before I have to pay my bills. So again, anything below 30, you can look at it and go, hey, we're at 24. What would it take to get to 23, 22, 21? So again, these are all things that could be very unique to your business. Next one is average days inventory. As I said, that's medication and supplies. It's percentage of revenue. We did an inventory webinar 2 weeks ago. You know, the question everybody asks, well, what's the standard? What should everything be? And the question is, it depends on your practice. You know, you could have a practice that has 40% cost of goods, which is probably higher than the average in North America. But if you'll see on my next slide, your average days inventory. How many days does it take you to sell your inventory? Here's a formula. And for everybody who is on this call right now, we'll send you a summary of the formulas, just so you have a handy reference. We'll send those out to you by tomorrow. And so if you have inventory that you can turn over under 30 days, I don't care if you have 40% cost of goods. If you're moving your inventory that quickly, you're making money on it. You're selling it. You're accounting for it. That just is your type of practice that maybe you have a less services relative to what you sell. You may say, you know what, hey, our cost of goods is 40%, our services are 60%. I make more money on services, so maybe I want to go to 65-35. So again, you can look at that uniquely. Before we get to the next session, somebody asked, when tracking EBITDA, do you recommend normalizing for DVM compensation or at least owner compensation, given the owners pay themselves in different ways? That's a really good question, and I said yes. I mean, let me put it this way. If you're comparing internally and you have some weird system of how you pay the owners and it's the same every year, nothing changes, fine, I don't care, because you're comparing apples to apples. You know, that owner compensation and DVM compensation is going to change when you get normalized when you're going to sell your practice, for sure. So if you want to look at what my practice may be worth by selling, then you want to do that normalization for sure. I hope that answered the question. And if not, please just type it in there. So let's get back to, I think the key thing is measure what you want to manage. You know, I just picked this picture out of the newspaper. I mean, off the Great Barrier Reef in Australia last week, a drone counted 64,000 green sea turtles. So if you can count 64,000 green sea turtles in the ocean, you got a pretty good idea of how their nesting program, their conservation program is working, because they're measuring it and they can say, you know what, it's working. We only had 30,000 10 years ago, this is working. Or maybe they had 100,000 and maybe they have to do more. But I'm just saying, we can only manage what we have. We can only manage what we measure. And so I really would look at different parts of my practice and go, what am I concerned about? And try to find some ways to measure it. And really, all of a sudden, you have this dashboard or these numbers that come to you on a regular basis. And like a CBC Biochem, after a while, you understand what all those parameters leak. You can look at those very briefly and go, yeah, we're doing well. Or there's a line item here we want to work on a bit more. So yeah, maybe we got to spend some more time on that. So again, thank you very much from Oculus. Our goal is really to help you clear your path towards success. If you have any other questions on that, or you need some help with some of your metrics that you may have, let us know. Good question. I'm smiling a bit because I think somebody at Reth, what would the priorities be to measure regarding efficiency? I'm thinking more, you're going to say all of them. You know what? This is a really good question. We got stuck on efficiency, and that becomes this mantra of, I got to do this efficiently. We got to save money, got to do things efficiently. Guess what? We weren't really effective. We were annoying clients. We are upsetting staff. So let's turn efficiency to effectiveness. And to the question that was asked there, it's not all of them, but the first one I'm going to look at right away is my EBITDA. I think that's going to give me my bottom line to go, how profitable am I? If you are, and you think you're a healthy business, you should be above 10%, at least. I know there's people that can go 15, 20, 30. It depends on your species. It depends on a lot of things. If you're not above 10% on your EBITDA, that'd be the first thing I'm going to look at and go, all right, how do I get there? And then you start breaking it down, going, maybe my inventory is too high, maybe my prices aren't high enough. So there's a lot of factors. The other question is, what does your ideal reminder series look like, and what response rate do you aim for? You know, it really depends on the species. My response rate is, you know what, I'm selfish. I want 100. I'm not going to get it because there's attrition, but I want 100. And so that's what I'm going to aim for. But I'm just going to, what every single thing is, if I only had 70% reminder rates for rabies vaccine for horses, that's what I said, I do equine. All right, how do I get to 75 next year? So to me, the first thing is you're getting a baseline, and then it's like, how do I get better? How do I get better? And then the last question is, thank you so very much. So hey, we have an exciting next webinar. It's June 30th. We went from every week to every 2 weeks, really trying to make these webinars more valuable, more information. So we're back with Whitney this year. Whitney was with us, just when this whole pandemic started. She's a professor at the University of California, Berkeley's Haas School of Business, one of the top 10 business schools in North America. And Whitney has been a longtime friend of Oculus, has presented a lot of our live events, and just everybody loves her, whether it's in North America or in Europe. And her and I are working on building an interactive webinar next time. It's not even going to be a webinar. We're going to do it in Zoom meetings. So it allows people to actually interact and talk with each other. If you sign up, we're going to be actually sending you homework in advance, because we want to make this integrated and make this something that it's not just you listening to me, but that you're learning and that you can apply it to your own practice. So there'll be an email coming out probably by the end of this week, and we're trying it out. You may say, wow, that format was amazing, or you may say, yeah, go back to the drawing board. But hey, I think we're all getting zoomed out. We're getting Zoom fatigue. We're all seeing webinars. So we're going to try something a little bit different. So one last question that came in. What would you consider percentage of revenue should be spent on management costs? And again, this is a great question, but it's hard to measure because it comes down to, what do you have in the pile of management? You know, some people say, well, management is my accountant or my bookkeeper. It's the office manager. It is the practice owner who does some part-time management. And so again, it comes down to, what is it now? Look at that, solidify so you're consistent with what your management costs are. Let's say they're 4% now. Do we need that really? Like, is the owner who's doing part-time management really worth that $100,000? Is that just another way of money towards a spouse even? So, really look at it. And then, like, as the one question is asked before, can you normalize it of, what, this is what it really should be. And then again, if it was 4%, all right, can I go to 3.5%? Or that's efficiency to go to 3.5%, but I've lost my effectiveness and the business starts to decrease. It's a balancing act. It's like everything we do in medicine, it's a balancing act. So I'm just thinking we have one last question, and then I try to keep these short, but as the questions keep on coming in, I got to keep on answering them. I think that is it. Anyway, thank you very much. This will be posted on our resilience guide page and on YouTube. Thank you all very much, and I appreciate your time and effort on this. Bye-bye.